Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 calls for presentation of local remedies for validation as NCDC confirms 146 new cases.
We are so much in a hurry to obtain a homegrown cure.
President Buhari seeks Senate confirmation of 42 career ambassadors designate.
House of Reps adopts motion to mitigate social and economic impact of coronavirus pandemic.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss COVID-19 infectious diseases bill.
Now, a bill seeking the repeal of the Quarantine Act and enacting the Control of Infectious Diseases Act has passed second reading on the floor of the House of Representatives. Now, this is less than 2 weeks after it was introduced. The Infectious Diseases Bill seeks to make provisions relating to quarantine and regulations for preventing the introduction and spread of dangerous infectious diseases in Nigeria.
Speaker, House of Representatives Femi Gbajabiamila, who sponsored the bill with 2 other members, Honorable Pascal Obi and Honorable Tanko Sununu, has defended the bill, saying it is in the public interest. The bill, expected to amend the weaknesses of the Quarantine Act of 2004, is meant to handle infectious diseases as well as the public health emergency frameworks that require reforms in the country.
Now, the Infectious Diseases Bill, which provides updated legislation for the government's anti-pandemic efforts, also seeks to empower the Nigeria Center for Disease Control to make it more proactive, giving the NCDC, among other powers, the authority to order the administration of vaccines on Nigerians in a bid to control the spread of infectious diseases in the country. Now, the bill was set to clear the third stage of reading on the floor of the House when red flags were raised by some civil society groups and other Nigerians.
Well, and that happened on social media platforms. And one of the main criticisms of the Infectious Disease Act bill is that it imposes a duty on medical practitioners to provide information of any suspected case of infectious disease to the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, even as the power to administer the bill is vested on the Director General under the directive of the Minister. The critics called for it to be subjected to public scrutiny.
Certainly, but the critics themselves have been attacking the bill from all fronts, to the extent that some 41 civil society organizations signed a declaration also calling for inputs from members of the public. Now, what are the peculiarities of the Infectious Diseases Bill, and why is it important? More significantly, if the Infectious Disease Bill is meant to guard against future pandemics, why is it so controversial? We'll have guests to discuss these issues and more as they arise in the course of our in the course of our conversation segment. And it's on that note, we'd like to welcome you to the midweek edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you on the network service of the NTA. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Nigerian Umar. Many thanks for joining us on the program today. As always, we also have our newspaper review segment, business and others lined up for you on the show. For the news highlights this morning, let's join our colleague Musbao Danwahab. Good morning, Musbao.
It's a very good morning, Kirian. Let's take the news. Now let's tell you the latest on COVID-19 has 146 new cases and 6 deaths have been recorded in Nigeria. No new state has reported a case in the last 24 hours. Till date, 4,787 cases have been confirmed. 959 patients have been discharged and 158 deaths have been recorded in 34 states and the Federal Capital Territory. The 146 new cases were reported from 20 states, and Lagos tops the charts with 57 new cases, Kano 27, Kwara 10, Edo 9, Bauchi 8, Yobe 7, Kebbi and Oyo states have 4 cases each, Katsina and Niger states 3 each, while Plateau, Borno, Benue and Sokoto have 2 cases each, and Gombe, Enugu, Ebonyi, Ogun and Rivers, as well as the FCT, have a case each. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 says no local remedy for coronavirus will be overlooked as long as it is presented before the health authorities for verification and validation. Chairman of the task force, Boss Mustafa, stated this at a daily briefing in Abuja.
My encouragement to our people, our researchers, and those that are involved in the processes of manufacturing drugs, especially our homegrown cure, they should be patient and they should run it through a process. And that is the only way we can have it validated.
I called her on phone and persuaded her to just let them take the test. She gave me the condition that first they must give her all her results from the past. They took all her results, photocopied all of them, and gave them to her. But on the day of the test, when NCDC got there, she told them that she wanted the test to be taken by World Health Organization.
Local producers and manufacturers in the country have been challenged to support the federal government's one national response against COVID-19 by making their products available for use at this critical time. National Coordinator, African Union Development Agency and New Partnership for African Development, NEPAD, Gloria Akobundu, stated this in Abuja while receiving on behalf of the federal government 100 mattresses from a local manufacturer as donation to the COVID-19 fight.
More go to pay money anywhere to import goods and all that. Every country is minding their business at this point. So it's what you have that you leverage on. So we have our own people. Look at even the masks. Most of the masks in the market is produced locally. Ventilators now are being produced. So meaning this has already made us to think out of the box. And we need to sustain it.
This is our little token to support the federal government for onward distribution to the sick people, basically for the hospital, in making sure that all of us fight this pandemic.
And away from COVID-19, just so you know, some of Nigeria's diplomatic missions abroad are without ambassadors, and in order to close this gap, President Muhammadu Buhari has written the Senate requesting the confirmation of 42 persons as career ambassadors designate. National Assembly correspondents report that the President also sought approval for 4 nominees as chairmen and members of the Nigerian Law Reform Commission and 2 nominees as board members of the Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporation.
This request will receive the usual expeditious consideration of the Senate. In most of the countries, Nigeria should have ambassadors. There are no ambassadors at the moment, and it's taking toll on us.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives on Tuesday considered and adopted several motions bordering on interventions to mitigate the social and economic impact of coronavirus pandemic. Issues of evacuation, alternative medicine and provision of testing centers were also discussed at the Tuesday's plenary.
In some cases, these children, after traveling for so many hours under harsh weather, were rejected and turned back by their states of origin, or at best, they were kept in isolation under dehumanizing and demeaning conditions.
Urge the Northern Governors Forum to provide their Almajiris with the requisite tools for the universal basic and technical education system.
Away from the National Assembly, the federal government says it will continue to maximize the potential in the water, hydropower and irrigation sectors through an effective public-private partnership. Such partnership is now set to deliver the stranded 30 megawatt hydropower at the Gurara multi-purpose dam in Kaduna State.
We are now ready to put the 30 megawatt Gurara hydropower plant into sustainable operation towards increasing access to electricity in our country, especially in Kaduna State, for job creation and improved life for the people.
The power plant is ready, it's been completed. The transmission line also has been completed, but there is a small portion of the connection in Kaduna that needs to be tidied up, and that's why the minister has given a machine order that this should be done as soon as possible to be able to release the 30 megawatts to the people.
The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development is set to commence the homegrown school feeding program on Thursday this week in Abuja. This follows an inspection of food items by the ministry that will be distributed to households as part of effort to make children have access to school feeding despite being at home.
There's an aggregation. This is what's supposed to go in daily to them. And we have compacted all that to make sure that what is in these bags is what ordinarily would have taken them for the number of days were they to be in school. This is going to be replicated in all the states of the Federation where the program is ongoing. And the only difference is rather than going to the schools, we're going to the various households.
And that concludes the news highlight for now. Good morning, Nigeria. On COVID-19 infectious disease bill will continue with Kingsley and Kirian immediately after this break. I am Musbal and Wahab. Good morning.
The main way coronavirus spread is when infected people sneeze and cough. Small droplets of fluid expelled by cough or sneezes are laced with viruses looking for new respiratory tracts to infect. When a sick person sneezes around someone who is healthy, the virus can land in the nose, mouth, or even the eyes, causing an infection. Symptoms can include fever, cough, shortness of breath. Symptoms may appear within 2 to 14 days. Seek medical advice if you develop symptoms and have been in close contact with a person known to have COVID-19, or if you live or have recently been in an area with ongoing spread of COVID-19. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Did you know that using bar soap and water protects against viruses? Many viruses are surrounded by an envelope with receptors that enable them to enter a human cell and cause infection. Bar soap destroys the outer layer of the virus and effectively removes it and reduces your chances of contracting the virus. Protect your family from the spread of viruses. Wash your hands using bar soap and water. Brought to you by Medifax and Dental.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. In this time of despair, our country, Nigeria, needs us now more than ever. We stand a chance to save our great country, Nigeria. A chance to rise up from this pandemic stronger and better. What will be the gain if we do not learn from other countries and observe the lockdown to stop the further spread of the virus? If we loosen our guards and allow this virus doom our very existence, then what have we gained? This is the call to every Nigerian to unite as one and stop the spread of this deadly virus. Stay at home and stay safe. Remember, the virus doesn't move unless we move. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now it's time for business news with the African Union partnering with HP Computers for digital learning in African countries. That story and more with our correspondent Abdulkarim Zurmi.
In a recent virtual session, which comprised of Specialized Technical Committee on Education, Science and Technology, HP and the African Union Commission agreed to join in efforts to expand digital learning opportunities for all youths in 55 AU countries on the continent. With the youngest population in the world, the two entities have agreed to collaborate on initiatives including exchange of information and expertise, as well as promotion of online platforms to support digital learning across the board. Elizabeth Morano, Managing Director of HP Africa, presented HP's Learning Initiative for Entrepreneurship and Be Online programs during the virtual meeting, which can be utilized to support schools and educators in their distance learning endeavors. Now let's head to the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange to see how the market fared on Tuesday, 12th of May, 2020. With business news, Abdulkarim Zurmi.
Thank you, Abdulkarim, for that business package. And next on Good Morning Nigeria will be newspaper review.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Atebe is here with us as always. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, you're welcome, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right.
All right, let's begin by taking a look at the Punch newspaper. Punch above the nameplate says Nigerians consumed 2.5 trillion naira petrol in 13 months, and that's according to the NNPC with details at page 19. Nigeria, other African countries to lose $200 billion in 2020, and that's attributed to the IMF. Constitutional amendment, reps propose independent candidacy. That's page 8. NLNG plans to begin domestic supply of LNG. And then an earpiece beside the name flag, you have the update of the figures relating to coronavirus in the country. 4,787 confirmed, 959 discharged, and unfortunately 158 fatalities. And then you also have the global figures there. Well over 4.3 million persons have been infected, and also over 290,000 deceased. This story comes with a double-decker headline. It says PTF deploys pathologists over Bauchi and Jigawa strange deaths. Can we see that on the screen? PTF deploys pathologists over Bauchi and Jigawa strange deaths. With 3 riders, stop Amajire's evacuation. Task force and reps tell northern governors. Once again, stop Amajire evacuation. Task force and reps tell northern governors. Nigerians picking face masks from dump sites. Panel cries out. 6 days after arrival, Dubai returnee dies of COVID-19 in Lagos. And below the photographs there, it says Zulum plans to revive 6 ailing state companies. That's page 29. And Kano local government boss faces arraignment for diversion of palliatives. Scores flee as bandits sack Niger communities. Uncertainties surrounds Gambari's reported appointment as Buhari's chief of staff. That's page 7. Gunmen kill 15, raise houses in Kaduna village attacks. That's page 10. Total pension assets rise to 10.5 trillion naira. Details on page 19. Carry on.
All right, to the leadership newspaper, below the nameplate, insurance firms upgrade IT platforms, begin online policy sales. That's on page 6. 11 states top PMB's 42 career ambassadors designate list. The story is captured on page 7. Now the lead story, federal government looks inward, injects 100 billion naira into research for COVID-19 cure. That's on page 4. It had several riders. Says a vaccine expected next year. PSN laments dumping of local drugs for Madagascar herbal remedy. PTF warns against sharing of face masks. Charges states to align with national guidelines. Asks children to keep away from grandparents. Lawan decries social distancing violation in Senate. A mayor of Daura recovering as Doyin Okue and wife leave isolation center. Sokoto Gombe discharged 80 patients as Dubai returnee dies of coronavirus. That's on page 4. And now on the right-hand side of the newspaper, that's besides the photograph here, Boko Haram's end in sight as Shekau begs for negotiation. With a rider, sect leader weeps in new video. That's on page 4. And the stories at the bottom of the newspaper, northern governors hail federal government's renewed move to revamp Ajokuta Steel Complex. That's on page 8. World Nurses Day. Reps, labor seek better deal for nurses. That's on page 7. 90% of strange deaths not connected to COVID-19, according to Yobe state government. Details on page 9. Lawyers divided as Carlos co-convict gets release warrant. It's captured fully on page 7. Bayo.
All right, thank you very much. Let's start with the update on the COVID-19. NCDC reported 146 new cases yesterday. They were all in 20 states of the Federation. At least the rest of the 16 states didn't have any cases. Lagos, as usual, is leading the pack with 57 cases, Kano 27, Kwara 10, Edo 9, Bauchi 8, and Yobe 7. Total cases so far is 4,787. There have been 6 deaths, and this brings the total deaths to 158. So far, 959 have been discharged because they've been treated of COVID-19. One of the dead in Lagos is a 32-year-old mate who recently was among the 250 Nigerians that were evacuated from United Arab Emirates, Dubai. In Kogi State, 111 persons were tested without supervision by the NCDC official. All tests returned negative. The Commissioner for Communication and Strategy, Kingsley Fanwo, says the test kits were procured independently, but NCDC guidelines were followed. He says those tested randomly were picked, and the Commissioner asserted that Kogi State still remain COVID-19 free. He indicated, however, that when next they are going to do the test, they will not go to the street. Rather, they will go to the hospitals and look for persons with symptoms or suspected cases of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force has asserted that disposable face masks are being picked from rubbish dumps and being recycled for sale. This alarm was raised by Boss Mustafa, and he described such unhealthy practice would inevitably compound all the initiatives to confine COVID-19. He stressed that except fabrics that are used for making masks that are washable, every disposable mask is a hazardous medical waste and should not be picked up again. Speaking at the daily press briefing, he also enjoined northern state governors to suspend evacuation of Almajiri of their states. Boss Mustafa says this is not time for the movement of Almajiri. If we say interstate movements are banned, then movement of all Almajiri are not essential movement. On the homegrown for vaccines, he also explained that vaccines will not be ready until 2021. However, he challenged our researchers to come up with homegrown drugs. We must also be patient for such proposals to go through the validation process for the purpose of safety for the patients and the implications. The national coordinator, Dr. Sani Ali, also says that all drugs to be used to treat COVID-19 patients must be subjected to the certification process by the authorities and the due process concerned. Meanwhile, in Ogun State, traffic compliance and enforcement has intercepted a truck with 30 youths at Sangoota. They were hidden in a truck with Kano registration number. They turned back the truck, the basket of pepper, and the use for the breach of prohibition of movement. Many migrant laborers seeking to work on farms at the onset of the rainy season are being dubbed as Almajiri. Some media even unscrupulously report them as Almajiris exporting COVID-19 to other parts of the country. The Punch also reports that Oyo State Road Transport Management Authority tracked 67 trailers conveying non-essential goods and travelers from the northern parts of the country. The chairman of the committee, Moga Jifagbemi, says those flouting the interstate lockdown have been turned back. Meanwhile, in Kaduna State, 605 violators of the lockdown have been convicted, and the Attorney General of the State and Commissioner of Justice says 1.9 million has been realized as fines. 41 offenders were sentenced to community service of 7 days each. There's that story that was read about possibility of a new chief of staff. Yes, the special advisor to the president, Femi Adesina, has confirmed that at the Federal Executive Council, there's a probability that a new chief of staff will be announced. However, most papers have been speculating on Professor Ibrahim Abuala Gambari, who was Nigeria's permanent representative at the UN. In fact, during the era of the military regime of President Muhammad Buhari, 84-85, he was our foreign affairs minister. He had grown from the Institute of International Affairs to becoming the international minister. Subsequently, he also served at the United Nations Secretary General at various positions. In fact, he was chairman of the World Against Apartheid, and he also served in several ECOWAS, AU, and international positions. He's a scholar, an international diplomat of repute.
Yes, of course. He has a very rich background, when it comes to the level of exposure that is attained in his career as a personality. Of course, until the announcement comes up, we'll be able to know who that will be.
Can I draw attention to what I want to describe as, the papers describe it as a miracle? A 113-year-old woman, believed to be the oldest woman in Spain, has recovered from COVID-19. So that tells you that COVID-19 is not a death sentence. Maria Bryas was diagnosed with the virus after Spain went into lockdown. She is now well and wants to speak. In fact, she wants to talk about her reflections to show that she is herself again. By her survival and her age, she has lived through the flu pandemic of 1918. She also survived the 1939 Spanish Civil War and also coronavirus pandemic 2019. Lucky woman.
I think there's apparently more happy news with regard to the Nigerian local response to the coronavirus. We had that in our news bulletin. The Presidential Task Force inviting researchers who have remedies to present them for verification and validation, which is heartwarming. Yesterday on Good Morning Nigeria, we were again on that same subject matter. We had guests here with us in the studios as well as at Enugu Network Center. Part of what was raised was the need to encourage local researchers, fund them, not just in terms of getting to work into the laboratory, but also to enable them proceed with the various stages of verification and validation and then clinical trials, because these are usually very expensive. Happily, we had a Director General of NIPRID. He was one of our guests here. Dr. Ben Amodu, who is based in Abuja, was also one of our guests. Another guest also came in from Yobe. In fact, he said that he was going to present whatever he had formulated for validation straight away. I think that's very heartwarming. Additionally, the central bank governor announced yesterday that the central bank, would provide funding for research for this particular purpose, and that there is a need for us to seek homegrown solutions. But what wasn't clarified, and I think that this needs to be made clear, because the reports that I read indicated that, the central bank will now be providing 100 billion naira for research. No, because the central bank had earlier indicated that it will be providing 100 billion naira, either as grants or as soft loans for pharmaceutical companies and others that are engaged in the health services sector. Now, is it from that amount that medical research will also be funded, or specific research into COVID-19 will also be funded? I think that needs to be streamlined, and they can sort it out. NMR, Kyria, you remember? Yes. That Institute of Medical Research has been involved in this. Professor McDonald Idu is also involved. Zainab, who is the Minister of Health, is also involved. So let them streamline it, and then let these researchers get to work.
I may not be really concerned about streamlining. The most important thing here is that we are directing our thought towards sourcing internally what can change the course of our history in terms of development. Generally speaking, apart from just research and science, before now, it would have been instituted over the years to have a research funding like PTF. We'll have a research fund where researchers will have access to funds to research into all aspects of our life, not just because coronavirus emerged. So that's a good move in the right direction. In terms of clarification as to where fund goes, for me, is immaterial. Let the fund be there.
What makes it immaterial?
No, what I'm saying in effect is that it is important that there is a fund dedicated to research ab initio before the advent of coronavirus. That's what I mean here.
Sorry, let's clarify this. Look, it is not as if there isn't funding available for TED Fund, for instance. TED Fund, part of what it does, apart from providing infrastructure, is also funding research and publications in tertiary institutions. So, but this is specific to science and technology, and the central bank said what we are targeting is coronavirus as well as health-related issues.
Well, I think from that specification, now we now have a challenge, which is coronavirus. But most importantly, our universities must not be just gone, they must relate to the town. That is to say, they must direct their research initiatives towards solving societal problems. So it is incumbent now on the Ministry of Science and Technology to coordinate with the Ministry of Education as well as Ministry of Health to tackle not just COVID-19, which is our perennial problem, but subsequently any other social problem that impinges on society. What is the relevance of university and tertiary institutions if they don't direct their research towards solving the problems of their immediate environment? So with the funding coming from the central bank, that is a very bold initiative. It means that now there is a fund available, like Kingsley pointed out. There will be clarifications about modalities for accessing those funds.
It's entirely a good development. You know, before now, the Ministry of Science and Tech has been working towards having science and technology fund before the coronavirus. So we are beginning to take advantage of coronavirus to begin to look into those things very more seriously. Now let's go to the editorial for today. It's from the Nation newspaper at page 19. A welcome intervention. Bankers Committee's directive against layoff in banks is in order. Let me just take two sentences here. So, however, much as it is perfectly understood that the banks are not under obligation to retain any personnel perceived to be surplus to their needs, It seems to us the expression of capitalism of the crudest kind that a bank which declared a profit after tax of 40.9 billion in the first quarter just ended March 31st would so soon after be contemplating a massive layoff of personnel, the same personnel that delivered the profit using COVID-19 as an excuse.
Yes, actually the editorial happened on the fact that a chief executive of a bank was overheard that if they are not going to be fully operational by December, then they don't need many of their personnel. For instance, tea girls, cleaners, and tellers. However, the bankers committee was quick to intervene to stop any initiative about laying off. And they also have praised the central bank for endorsing that initiative. And what they, like you pointed out, they said there's no justification for this unbridled capitalism. A capitalist always wants to maximize his profit and also limit his cost. If a bank has declared in the first quarter of this March ending alone a profit of 40.9 million, why would you want to lay off some of the persons who contributed into making that profit?
40.9 billion?
Yes, in the first quarter of March 31st this year. And then you are about to lay them off because you are using COVID-19 as an excuse. COVID-19 has occasioned disruption in economic activities, including banking and financing, but it shouldn't be to that extent that you use it as an excuse to lay off those who contributed to the golden eggs. You want now to lay them off. So the editorial is happening on that. It was bold that central bank has come in there, and the banks too must learn to bear some of this burden.
What about adherence to the directive? Because I can tell you that I know just one person that has been laid off. That was about 2 weeks ago, already laid off from a bank.
Well, he can write a petition to the Bankers Committee because the Bankers Committee has recommended, and I understand the central bank has endorsed that. And therefore, if anybody is laid off in the bank, irrespective of whether it's a food staff, it's a teller, it's a tea girl, it's a security man, or what have you, he has a right to write and get himself reinstated.
Oh, well, yeah, we do hope that all of that will be taken into consideration on the May 1st this year when we had Labour Day celebration. It was a point that both the NLC President and the Honourable Minister of Labour and Employment also dwelt on, that there is need to follow due process in all of this, and that will involve negotiations and then working out the proper arithmetic. And a number of these financial institutions, I wouldn't know whether they have overcome this. You know, the labor unions always were at loggerheads with them over casualization.
Yes.
So we don't know those who are being targeted now for retrenchment, whether they are regular staff or whether they are those who are casual staff. But whoever they are, I think it's important for them to follow due process. And then the adjacency of those humongous figures that they returned in the first quarter versus the plan to simply lay off people, it's on the face of it unconscionable.
Yes, certainly. Yes. And there's a subterfuge to this. This idea of employing casual staff. It is understood that the banks don't do it directly. They fund such out to another agency. So an agent outside recruits them. Some of them are paid about 40,000 naira, the individuals. But the agency that employs them gets about 100 and something thousand naira. And so you have these middlemen exploiting the young men and ladies who are working as tellers.
That's total exploitation that are doing. Many of them are not a permanent staff of those banks.
Yes.
They are just hired to work for a period of time. They will lay off. After some time, they will recruit more people and stuff like that. It is not a healthy development as far as the banking sector is concerned. And of course, the measure taken now by the Bankers Committee is a welcome development.
In fact, that has also contributed to the heightening of fraud within the banking system. So when you have persons who don't have any obligation to the bank they are working for, the tendency is that the temptations become very, very high.
Yeah.
All right. There are other stories. Today is Wednesday.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens if there is a virtual Federal Executive Council meeting and who will be unveiled, in terms of fresh appointment, so that the uncertainty or the rumors or speculations will be laid to rest. Because it's a particularly important and high office in the presidency, and they shouldn't ordinarily be the subject of this kind of speculation, especially when there is a presumption of an appointment, as the speculators have said. So, Bayo Atoebe, thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you.
We'll see you again tomorrow. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with discussing the Infectious Diseases Bill 2020 now before the House of Reps.
Coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, is spreading at an alarming rate all over the globe, including Nigeria. With the number of infected persons in Nigeria increasing daily, prevention is better than cure. Coronavirus has no cure. The virus spreads from one person who affects two persons, and by the time the affected person is isolated, the two persons have affected four, and it keeps spreading. You must take preventive measures to save yourself and that of the people around you. Always wash your hands with soap and water. Put distance between yourself and others. Whenever you cough or sneeze, cover your mouth. Clean and disinfect surfaces. Stay at home if you're sick and contact the proper authorities. Together, we can cut down the spread of the coronavirus. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest TV network.
Welcome, dear. Have you washed your hands?
Inside my house again. This thing not the key black man.
I don't know if it's misinformation or poor hygiene that will kill you first. Coronavirus is real, and good hygiene practice will save your life. Anyway, no hand washing, no eating.
I will not take care of it. That's one of the parents. Coronavirus is real and it's on the rise. But you can help yourself and help others to be safe. Remember, we can stop the spread. It's in your hands.
This message is from the Akinfade Foundation in partnership with the National Orientation Agency with support from MacArthur Foundation.
Do you not know that our enemies have no face? They are indigents of no state. They come from no place. And if this boat capsizes, every one of us will go under. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer. Do not say, I am the Iroko when the forest is burning. Do not say, I am the Obeche when the forest is burning. Our differences will not stop us from perishing together. So when the drums sound, let everybody answer.
I just don't understand this coronavirus thing. Is it real?
See, coronavirus, known as COVID-19, it's a global problem and has killed thousands of people in China, Italy, Spain, UK, US, and other countries around the world.
Okay. Now, why are they saying that we should stay home?
Because if you go outside and get in contact with someone who is infected, you become affected and then come back home, affect your family. That's how it happens in other countries.
Now, please, help me explain what this social distance is all about.
See, as we are now, the virus travels through the air and by touch. We must maintain 6 foot distance at all times.
Oh, so it's not by washing my hands with soap and water or hand sanitizer that is only important?
Washing of our hands regularly is very important. But we must come together and fight this virus like we did Ebola. It is our responsibility to each other.
Coronavirus is real.
steps to avoid this pandemic. Wash your hands regularly or sanitize your hands. Keep social and physical distancing. Avoid crowded places. Stay at home unless absolutely necessary. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth if your hands are not clean. Avoid the spread of coronavirus. Coronavirus is real.
Well, in case you just joined us, this is Good Morning Nigeria on NTA. And to set the mood for our conversation this morning on COVID-19 infectious disease bill, here is a backgrounder put together by Abdul Malik Adio.
A 47-page bill with 81 clauses set in motion by Speaker House of Representatives and 2 other co-sponsors is meant to repeal and replace the Quarantine Act of 2004.
What this bill seeks to do is to empower the NCDC in several areas, in matters of quarantine and the administration of public health and infectious diseases.
16 years down the line, experts say the Quarantine Act of 2004 makes no allowance for infectious diseases and pandemics like the coronavirus. Regarding punishment, the Quarantine Act of 2004 puts a fine from 2,000 naira above, or prison term of 6 months, or both for any person found to be in violation of the provisions. This, analysts say, cannot deter violators in the present-day Nigeria. While commending the effort of the present leadership of the House of Representatives in recognizing these gaps, the contention, however, in the new bill they noted is in the provision and the timing of its proposed enactment. Also of concern is the failure to take into account the current federal structure in Nigeria, where powers are devolved among the 3 constituent units, the federal, state, and local government, and other matters that deals with law, order, and judicial matters. Meanwhile, Section 8 of the proposed bill, experts say, takes away the duty of confidentiality owned patient by their personal physicians. The import of Section 30 of the bill is also of concern that it will allow forceful vaccination against a person's choice. The power to confiscate and turn property any state of the Federation into an isolation center, they say, may become subject to abuse and in conflict with executive powers of state governors and the fundamental right of citizens. How relevant is the infectious disease bill at this time? Should the infectious disease bill be made part of a broader legislative agenda for the Nigerian health sector in a post-coronavirus world? How critical can the infectious disease bill be against future pandemics if it passes? Guest on Good Morning Nigeria will have answers to this and more shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Abdul Malik Adio, for that background. Here with us in the studios to discuss the issue in further detail, let's welcome Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, who's a member of the House of Representatives. Honorable, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
It's my pleasure to be here. Good morning.
Okay. Gentlemen. Also here with us in the studios is Frank Tete. He's a human rights lawyer and executive director of the Citizens Advocacy for Social and Economic Rights. Pleasure to have you with us again on the program.
Thank you.
All right. And by the way, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim is also a lawyer.
All right. Okay. Therefore, I'm surrounded by lawyers here in the studio. All right. I hope I'm going to survive them. And joining the conversation from our Kano studio is Professor Isa Sadiq Abubakar. He's the Director, Center for Infectious Disease Research, Bayero University, Kano, and member Kano State Task Force on COVID-19. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Kingsley and Kieran. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, and on Skype, from Ile-Ife is Professor Joshua Ojo. Professor Ojo is the president, Living Science Foundation, Ile-Ife. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, gentlemen, once again, I'd like to have you with us on this conversation. Let's begin with the Honorable Member of the House of Representatives. You listened to the background report, and we have also seen a number of accounts in the media, both traditional and online, with regard to what the Infectious Disease Bill 2020 seeks to achieve. But in a nutshell, why is this bill significant? What makes it relevant in terms of its inherent provisions and utility?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that the outrage that has greeted the bill is, the bill is not unconnected with the atmosphere of suspicion that has enveloped the entire saga relating to COVID-19. And a lot of people having the feeling that, look, this conspiracy theory is so thick in the air. Otherwise, if you look at the intendment of those who proposed this bill, you know that it's a quick reaction to an unusual situation. Nobody was prepared for this. We had a situation where, just all of a sudden, the entire world is engulfed by an infectious, very, very infectious disease that is ravaging all nations. And there was a need for a quick response to it. So if you look at it, the intention is to provide adequate safeguard. I'm talking about the intention now. The intention of the lawmakers was to provide adequate safeguard and sufficient powers to the authority of the NCDC, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, so that they can combat this scourge. So to that extent, you see that it's a noble intention. But whether the provisions of the bill actually will drive home the nobility of this intention is a different ballgame altogether. But I think there was really there was a necessity for such a reaction, but the degree of it is what I think is the major problem here. There is no doubt that most of our laws are archaic and cannot really meet up with the trend. The kind of challenges, contemporary challenges we're facing in today's world. So to that extent, I think it's a good one. But whether the letters of that bill will meet the aspiration of the people vis-a-vis some other extant laws is a different thing altogether.
All right, thank you. I want to take away the issue of a feeling of fear that you raised, and there's some level of uncertainty. But that does not affect the intendment of the bill, as you have rightly articulated. But I want to ask Frank Tate to also share his view on the bill, take an overview of the bill, the content of the bill, the letters in the bill, and of course, in terms of utility, whether the bill is with the right intentions.
Well, it's difficult to attribute good intentions to that bill, especially because it suffers the problem of ill timing. Nigerians are grappling with a virus that they don't understand, that is not of their making, that is completely changed their lives in such a short time. When we ought to be gravitated and inundated with the kind of messages we get on NTA, encouraging us on how to overcome this disease, you find a private member bill being introduced, not an executive bill. The NCDC didn't say they were short of powers in carrying out their intention. The president isn't complaining that he doesn't have enough sufficient powers to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. In fact, the government has done its best in responding, and it is in fact responding to to it. And then, in the midst of this kind of crisis, you introduce that kind of divisive bill, that kind of bill that, that transforms the medical doctor who is supposed to be the Director General of the National Center for Disease Control into a law enforcement agent having more powers than the policeman. And in fact, we have currently witnessed how Nigerians have been traumatized and terrorized by some state governors, all in the name of COVID-19. This is not the time for that kind of bill. You asked me about the provisions of the bill. Let's not even go there, because they are introductions that are so strange to our democratic culture. You wonder, why would the National Assembly ever contemplate? I'm happy that it's not an executive bill. The government didn't introduce that bill. That kind of bill won't come from the government. It was just in 2018 that the government signed into law, enacted the National Center for Disease Control Act in 2018. So if you think that there was one kind of strange exigency for that kind of bill, the government ought to have known that. We are in the middle of a crisis. We are not even past the crisis yet. We don't have lessons yet to learn from the crisis. You are introducing a bill compelling people. No, let's start first. If you look at the NCDC Act, it gives the NCDC Director General sufficient powers, but to cooperate. You see, I'm happy that I'm dealing with lawyers here, including Kingsley. You should know that the success of the law, most of the times, is not in the power of coercion. You don't just wake up and then give those kind of strange, enormous powers to a Director General, a medical doctor. It is not only that. And then you say that only a magistrate court, a very inferior court in our judicial system, should have jurisdiction over the administration of that law. In fact, there are a lot of manifest inconsistencies with our constitution, derogations, terrible derogations from the fundamental human rights of Nigerians that cannot be contemplated given our legal history and culture. So, and then you now introduce this bill in the middle of a crisis. Now, further heightening the fears of what the Honorable has referred to as conspiracy theories that are rife in the air. No, we don't need that at this time.
All right, Frank Tete, thank you very much for your opening salvo. I will return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go over to our Kano Network Center, where we earlier introduced Professor Issa Sadiq Abubakar, who during this coronavirus pandemic has been one of our regular guests, joining us always from Kano. And he's, of course, at Bayero University, where he's Director Center for Infectious Diseases Research and also a member of the COVID-19 task force team in that state. Well, we're not going to ask you about the situation in Kano, but of course you've been part of all of this, and you've also been a researcher into infectious diseases. Tell us something. Is there any constraint that you suffer either as a researcher into infectious diseases on account of inadequate legislation, or there are matters that you think that the law might have helped in fast-tracking, which a bill of this nature certainly comes in to fill the gap?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. In public health practice, whether at the level of research or in interventions, definitely practitioners of public health suffer some issues that deter us from success. And of course, as researchers or as public health practitioners, we need to be assisted to deliver on our mandates. So it is an important development that people will come up with laws which will support the execution of laws which will support public health. Well, we are all living witnesses to some of the deficiencies that we encounter with implementation of laws. For example, our laws are archaic, For example, the quarantine law or act has been with us for many years, and it is not serving the purpose. So if by any means we now have a bill coming to become an act that will support public health practitioners and medical doctors to exercise powers that will help them to deliver better health services to the public, it is a welcome development. We know, however, that I'm not a lawyer, but I know that my colleagues are frowning at the introduction of the new Infectious Disease Act, because they are of the opinion that it will infringe on the fundamental human rights of Nigerians. But I just want to draw our attention to the fact that as an individual, your right stops where the right of other people begins. Now, what we need to consider is the fact that there are so many people who do not want to obey the laws, and their disobedience of the law will definitely impinge on the right of others, because their health may be harmed by other people who are not playing according to the rules of the game. So definitely, personally, I feel that any law that will empower health workers, whether the Minister of Health or any other officer that is in charge of any agency in the health sector, it is a welcome development, as it will help us to deliver on our mandates better than we are doing right now. That is why, as doctors, we've been calling for a long time for us to have a Surgeon General of the Federation, whose powers definitely are stronger than the powers that has been bestowed on the Minister of Health. And of course, if we have such an office or officer overseeing the affairs of health in the country, it will help us. And so I'm in support of taking the Quarantine Act of 2004 and readjusting it, improving on it in such a way that it will improve on the powers that the officers at the helm of affairs in the health sector will have, so that they will take care of Nigerians better than we are doing right now. However, I know that my colleagues on the other side of the room, mainly the lawyers, know the law better than I do, and they may have a lot of issues with some of the contents of the new Infectious Disease Act, or bill as it is of now, until it becomes an act. I know that it is going to be problematic in kind of a way, but then we should aim at trying to make it better. We should aim at getting Nigerians to rally round and then improve on it, so that we will not just send it away, but trying to modify it so that it will help us as a nation. Thank you.
All right, thank you indeed. And let's go over to Professor Joshua Ojo, who is the president of Living Science Foundation. Professor Ojo, coronavirus is a novel virus which has literally forced over 180 governments across the globe, to think of reworking their health sector and trying to see how they can inject more blood or power, if you like, or energy to see how diseases like corona can be contained. Presently in Nigeria, a lot of efforts are being made from different quarters to see how we can fight this virus. And one of such is the bill that we are talking about now, in which many people say is not the right time. But again, looking at the content of the bill and the and the intention of the bill, which is to address the issue of Quarantine Act of 2004, to be able to give more powers to NCDC and perhaps other establishments concerned with the fight against infectious diseases to have a more proactive nature, futuristically and even presently. In your opinion, is that bill worth really deliberating on at the moment at the House of Representatives?
Thank you so very much for this opportunity. Like you said, there are rationale to contemplate upgrading the existing laws. We agree with that. But as the lawyer, Mr. Tete, said, the intentions and the timing is certainly wrong, in my opinion. If you look at very germane is the fact that only in 2018 we have the act enacted strengthening the NCDC. And if you look at this current bill, it, in my opinion, totally discounts critical aspects of that act, which is in existence. It does not talk about the issue of the governing board of the NCDC, the issue of the National Advisory Council, because several of these potential bombs that are in the bill can be mitigated if the NCDC Act is taken into consideration. If we have committees comprised of people, eminent people from professionals, if they are represented in taking all these decisions. Because they're just deciding to take over a premise, just declare it isolation center, and that is it. You can just take somebody from the street or from anywhere and take him to quarantine for as long as the DG thinks fit. He must comply with whatever condition is subject to. All these things are outrageous, and it doesn't show that the intentions are good. But beyond the issues of human rights, we are also concerned about the elevation of vaccination to an unjustifiable platform, pedestal. It's as if vaccination is the cure for all the maladies that we have around. In fact, our reading of the bill is that all these draconian human rights abrogations and human dignity violations, they are meant to railroad us into accepting vaccination as all-round solution. Because if anybody takes the vaccination mandatorily, we see that that person will be excused from almost all the laws that are there. Because once you have a fake proof certification, there is no need for any port officer, any health officer, or the DG harassing you. So there are two issues here: the human rights abrogation and the issue of dignity, and also the elevation of vaccination to a pedestal that we think is not scientifically justifiable. Thank you.
All right, Professor Joshua Ojo, thank you very much for your initial comments. And Kirian, of course, you know, we've been talking about conspiracy theory. Yeah. One of the sources of those conspiracies, it is alleged, is this idea of compulsory vaccination. Exactly. So look, perhaps there are some vaccine manufacturers somewhere, and if you have a population of 200 million people, you imagine what the cost of a jab would be, you know, for 200 million. I want to resist the temptation of coming back to our guests in the Abuja studios and return to Professor Issa Sadiq before we come back to our guest. Professor Issa Sadiq, so that we have a better understanding, because the whole essence, even from the short title of the bill, infectious diseases, says that, look, the focus is on infectious diseases. What are the protocols now in dealing with infectious diseases in the country? If there is an outbreak, I mean, the coronavirus is not the first infectious disease we're having in Nigeria. I recall we had you as a guest, and you gave a moving narrative of what happened to some medical practitioners who died earlier this year while treating patients who had Lassa fever. So what is the existing protocol in dealing with infectious disease outbreak and management? And is that protocol, or are those protocols inadequate?
Well, in Nigeria, we have a number of documents that guide our practices in public health as well as in medical practice. Policies are not the issue because we have them in a number of documents. For example, if you take the National Health Act, if you look at our National Health Policy of 2016 and the National Health Act of 2016, our National Health Policy that is still in operation, and then if you look at the National Strategic Health Development Plan, as well as the NCDC Act, there are references to a lot of issues related to infectious diseases, especially looking closely at the Nigeria's National Strategic Health Development Plan 2 for 2018 to 2022. There are a lot of infectious diseases that have been captured for the first time, and all the strategies, starting from identification to the issues of surveillance and contact tracing, the issues of treatment, issues of isolation and quarantine of people, to the issues of even rehabilitation of those who are suffering debilitating illnesses as a result of the infectious disease, have been mentioned in that very important document. And the beauty of all this is that even to the last kobo, this document has been budgeted for. And so as with many other issues in Nigeria, our plans are very beautiful, but only that implementation is where we have the problem. And mostly it has to do with the stewardship role of governance and leadership, as well as the issues of financing. These are the problems. But as far as documents are concerned, we have them in adequate amount. But then our major challenge is the issue of implementation.
Okay, let's come back to the studio once more. Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, we're going to come back to you because you're positive about this bill from your opening remarks. But I'd like to bring in Frank Tate here, who has raised some points that tend not to be in consonance with what the bill is talking about. Now, let me raise other issues here. The bill is to amend weaknesses in the Quarantine Act 2004. The bill is intended to give powers to the NCDC in order for the establishment to be in a position to to order administration of vaccines. In other words, it's going to be the last gatekeeper in terms of validating vaccines meant to fight any kind of infectious disease. It's also to make the NCDC to be more proactive, and of course it also address health emergencies framework that require reforms in the system. But I want to ask you, why is it so controversial? Why is timing the problem? We are fighting a virus, and we've discovered that, look, we don't have a good protocol, so to speak, to address it. So why don't we create new formats, a new approach, to see how we can get around it?
The professor in Kano just said that we have beautiful laws, fantastic policies, but implementation is a problem. And then we think that the solution is to make more laws. How can you can't have anything further than the truth. See, there is a principle of law. The laws we have in Nigeria are living laws. There's a principle of law which, establishes what we call delegated legislation. There is usually a section in every law that is meant to create one form of service or the other to the public, empowering a member of the executive, either a director general, a minister, or the president, to make regulations. So this idea of coming with the argument that the law is archaic, is wrong. Because in our laws, very relevant laws, we still have laws that were made in 1881. For example, the Conveyances Act, that were applicable in England at that time, that are still very relevant now in Nigeria, and in fact, you cannot improve on those laws. It's difficult to improve on those laws. So let us drop this very lazy argument that the law is old. No, because in that law, for example, the Quarantine Act empowers the president at any time, whenever there is a situation that calls for, a description of an infectious disease, to make regulations. That's why the president was perfectly in order when he made regulations as to lockdown on the basis of the Quarantine Act. So you cannot say the Quarantine Act is obsolete. No.
That was also argued by a lawyer that the president did not have the powers to do that.
Oh, of course, we should check whether we should check the
a son for that matter.
No, you should check the basis of the information of that lawyer, because I challenged him. I did challenge him because the law. Take for example.
I'm sorry, Frank Churchill. He has since revised his position.
He revised his position.
Of course, he needed to, because law is written.
And respectfully so.
Law is written.
Why the error in the first place?
No,
that's confusion.
Law is written in plain, simple language, and sometimes the journalists like you understand it better. Until we go into the realm of conflict. Look at a bill, for example, an intended bill. Whereas if you look at the Quarantine Act, just about 3 pages, or you look at the NCDC Act, just about less than 18 pages, the idea is that a law cannot contemplate all the possibilities that will happen after it has been made. So it gives powers to the executive, and then it guards those powers by giving the courts the powers to carry on judicial review. This law is absolutely, in my opinion, respectful and humble opinion, unnecessary. The professor made reference to the 2014 National Health Act. Don't forget, we have the National Biosafety Management Agency Act of 2015, now amended in 2019 to empower the National Biosafety Management Agency to tackle issues of bioterrorism, which coronavirus falls into. We have the NAFDAC Act, we have the NCDC Act. What do we need this multiplicity of acts for? Do not forget, when you have these multiple conspiracy theories, there was the other day a group of politicians on live television accusing the sponsors of this bill of bribery, and that their intentions are less than noble. And when I expected a criminal action to emanate from members of the House of Representatives, up till now it's not there. Now you
yeah, but we can't leverage on that. Just mere allegations.
You need to imagine the terror that Nigerians are going through now. Whereas what we need ultimately, immediately, is to have a bill from the National Assembly on how to properly administer palliatives, for example, on how to administer or to set up a system of social security that will be free from corruption. That is what Nigerians are facing. And then you come up with a bill empowering one man, a medical doctor, to make up his mind, to seize any building, and then to decide for any reason that he believes, without recourse to any other, without even recourse to the minister. He seizes the building, and if you are angry as the owner of the building, all you can do, you have just 3 days. 3 days to approach not a high court that has the power of judicial review, but a mere inferior magistrate court. Someone, look, it's unimaginable. It's terrible.
Okay, Frank Churchill, thank you very much. For the benefit of our viewers, in Nigeria you have so-called inferior courts and then superior courts. The superior courts are usually called courts of record. In other words, you can refer to their decisions, and under the principle of what is called stare decisis, those decisions will be binding depending on the hierarchy of the courts. Kieran, are you lost?
I'm not lost.
Okay,
I'm not lost because I'm just thinking about the entire scenario. You have magistrate court, you have appeal court, you have a Supreme Court, and after if a magistrate court takes on an issue which it has a jurisdiction over, another court will say no, that is an inferior court. I don't understand that. There are judges there in those courts. Is the magistrate not a judge?
A magistrate court cannot contemplate dealing with issues of human rights.
That's right.
You cannot be violating right to privacy, right to freedom of movement, right to liberty, and then you approach one magistrate who is learning the law.
Learning the law.
Okay, all right. Frank, sorry, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim. I know you want to respond to this, but I wanted to ask you a specific question. See,
without prejudice to my right of response.
Perhaps you should exercise that right in the first instance, so we don't clutter other issues.
Okay, let me state, ab initio, that the fact that a bill emanates from an executive maybe an executive bill does not make it superior to a private member bill. Let's get that one cleared up in issue. So the quality of a bill is in the content, not the source. And secondly, beautiful rendition. Something that is, you see, sometimes leadership is not about taking popular decisions. Most times, it's about taking decisions that will impact on the life of the people ultimately. If we agree that these are not normal times, then we're good to go. What has happened is that I agree quite frankly that there are there are some very objectionable clauses in that legislation. To that extent, it will be subjected to public hearing, and those bills, those objectionable aspects of the bill have to be ripped off so that we can have an acceptable piece of legislation. Whether we like it or not, there are certain aspects of our laws, even in criminal jurisprudence, you find where somebody has embezzled billions of naira, the fine is still talking about 200,000 naira or maybe 20,000 naira. This cannot endure in contemporary Nigeria. So we need to have a legislation that will respond adequately to the currency. To the current situation we're faced with. These are not normal times. Let's get those ones clear. I'm graduating it further, sir. I want to say with considerable degree of certainty that one thing I found a bit curious about the bill is that even the decision, apart from the power, very wide powers to, and usually with this country, even before the introduction of the bill, in the first few weeks of the lockdown, we had more deaths recorded from the acts of security agencies than even the coronavirus itself. So I really fear if you now give this wide latitude to the Director General, whose decisions and appeal lies only to the minister, and even during the pendency of that appeal, his orders must still be carried on, then I think there's a problem. And to make it even a bit worse, the minister's decision is said to be final. I think that piece of legislation cannot. If you approach a court, you see, we really don't need to work ourselves up. There are legislations in this country where you go, just pick one or two sections and say, look, go to the Federal High Court, they'll strike it down. But it does not require us to throw away the baby with the bathwater. That has been a recurrent thing in this country. I recall the other time we were talking about they called it the third term bill during the Obasanjo, what have you. There were about 100 proposed amendments there, part of which were issues like rotational governorship or presidency. We are still living with some of those problems till this moment. But because of some few objectionable bills, which we could have used those same powers to strike down at, we decided to throw everything. And now we are going back to those issues. So I think we must look at it within the context of the times we are, so that we don't, for that. Nigerians are already traumatized, and I agree that we don't need to terrorize them more with legislation.
Well, thank you very much.
As you said earlier on, this is not normal times. And the world has been, projecting into what is going to be regarded now as a new normal. And if you're expecting the new normal to be the usual normal, it's going to be a problem. And that is why I'm not speaking for the bill, on behalf of the bill. I'm not talking as an ordinary Nigerian wanting to ask questions that ordinary Nigerians on the streets would like to ask with respect to this. Kingsley, please, let me drop the question. Yeah, well. And that's for Professor Joshua Ojo. From all indications, I've understood that one of the objectionable clauses, according to, I guess here, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, is the fact that enormous powers will be given to NCDC Director General to determine the administration of vaccines in Nigeria and other clauses in there. And this is a medical issue that we are talking about. I'm concerned about the fact that if you say that his decision is the final, perhaps you have to collaborate with the Minister of Health. These are health personnel. These are persons who studied medicine. And now someone is saying that the issue concerned that should be determined in a court of law where the lawyers did not train in the medical area. So it's a concern as well. Right, because if there are decisions taken when it comes to issue of infectious diseases, even overseas, we rely heavily on the NCDC or CDC of any other country. Now, this bill is trying to empower that office, which of course lacks certain powers in terms of determining or taking decisions concerning health, for Nigerians. So, in your opinion, is there no good thing about that bill? You say that it is not timely. You say the timing is wrong, but we are not in a normal situation at the moment. So, I think the people concerned are trying to see what we can do, to sustain the tempo of the fight against the coronavirus. And of course, being futuristic in terms of future viruses, because invariably more viruses are on the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with you that these are medical issues, and that is the very point we are making. They are medical issues, they cannot be vested in just one man, the DG NCDC. He has not asked for that power, and there's no point giving it to him. In actual fact, this bill is undermining the NCDC 2018 Act. That act empowers a governing body, a governing council, a governing board. And the governing board is mandated to set up committees. We envisage that these committees will be comprised of professionals, pharmacists, medical doctors, and practitioners. And these people, if they are left to take the decisions on a case-by-case basis, there will be less room for abuse. So it is this bill that is working against the quite okay act that we have on ground. So I think this bill is uncalled for, and like Mr. Tetia said, if there need to fine-tune from time to time, there's already provision to do that. So I'm not sure this bill is actually necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Joshua Ajo. Let's return to Honorable Shaba Ibrahim. The more discuss this issue, the more it becomes important to just interrogate the process of lawmaking. Listening to Professor Isa Sadiq from Kano and the catalogue of policies and extant laws relating to not just the health sector, but from which you can actually deal with infectious diseases, then the question must arise as to whether the lawmakers in the House of Reps, whether the sponsors of the bill or the members who have passed the bill, first reading, and I understand also the passing second reading, why expend so much legislative time and energy without apparent recourse to pre-existing pieces of legislation and policies so that the Infectious Diseases Bill 2020 would amount to, on the face of it, surplusage?
Thank you very much. If I understood you well, you're talking about the lawmaking process, maybe the seeming speed with which this legislation has been. I also take it back to the issue of the rapid response to what we think is a desperate situation. But let me say, you see, when we talk as a people here, because you're mainly if you are not initiated, if you're not present, if you don't even know what is happening within the confines of that gallery, you would think that once an issue comes, everybody supports. I want to tell you with considerable degree of certainty, from the voice vote we gathered that day, those who didn't believe that we needed to proceed in the manner we were proceeding were even more. You understand? And it took us to the point where we had to ask that the matter be stepped down. And that is what is leading to this call for public hearing now. And in the wisdom of the proponents of the bill, which you are unable to, the reasoning you are unable to take away. Okay, if we decide to go for public hearing, for instance, go for public hearing, that means we'll have to gather people. How are you sure we'll not even be in violation of the extant regulations relating to crowd and what have you? if the public would be entitled as a matter of right to be present there. These are some of the considerations that even went into it. But there are those who felt, and rightly too in my view, that look, notwithstanding all this, we need to follow it. I mean, take this thing in its stride, do it the way it ought to be. Because, as rightly stated by my colleague here, the need for palliatives and what have you ought to be captured too in this legislation. These are some of the proposals that you are going to find being injected into this bill when eventually it comes. It's going to come from several quarters. So, if you see, in the last assembly also, I'm aware that more than 100 pieces of legislation were passed in the twilight of the exit, maybe in the last few days, and nobody complained. But because these are not normal times, I think the need for it may even be more. If there were no objectionable clauses, the need for it may be even more expedient now than as at that time. So let us look at things within the confines of the situations that we found ourselves, and not this appeal to. Let me tell you, sir. In this country, I've come to discover, notwithstanding the lockdown, people were moving about freely. I can confirm to you, people were moving about freely. My house is very close to the highway. I stay in my house and I see vehicles roam about as if there was nothing like it. So we need those safeguards. If you talk about human rights, if everything is confined to human rights, yes, you have your rights, but your rights should not impugn on the rights of others. If, for instance, you are a carrier, there are people who deliberately go out to even infect others. There has to be some form of procedural safeguard to check the excesses of these wicked souls, so that the interest of the larger majority is protected.
No, but sorry, Honorable, I'd like you to speak to this. Yes, you've talked about the urgency of the times, but you're also familiar with the saying, more haste, less speed. Now, the urgency of the times doesn't necessarily mean that this is a tabula rasa. We have pieces of legislation. You have policies. So why don't you fetch out those things, or in dealing with implementation, such as you have found? You have the executive orders made by the president. Regulations made by the president. The president himself wasn't the one that would be manning the checkpoints to be sure that there were no violators of interstate restrictions, interstate movement restrictions.
With due respect, sir, let me tell you. You see, you cannot graduate regulations to the level of competition with the parent legislation. Are you getting my point? Regulations can only be made. Yes, they are subsidiary legislation. They are inferior. When legislations contain provisions that are materially in conflict with the parent legislation, it becomes null and void to a considerable extent. That legislation cannot stand, because the intention of regulations is to also make room for the proper or adequate interpretation or implementation of the provision of the main legislation. It is never intended to expand the frontiers of those legislation. So the regulation cannot overtake the parent. So there are instances where you cannot take the regulation beyond. This calls for intervention by way of legislative review or amendment, or a new law altogether.
All right. You know, what is interesting, about our laws and its practice, as the case may be, is because there are several interpretations to certain acts and what have you. And from what you have just explained, then there is need for a review. In our history, we have amendments of constitutions. We have reforms, law reforms. Today we're still talking about law reforms. So see, there's reforms and what have you. And again, as the society progresses, globally speaking, right, you need to look for profile some solutions to that. And I can agree that what coronavirus has brought globally is that governments are sitting up everywhere, even in the first world and the so-called third world, or perhaps a low or middle-income countries like Nigeria. The die is cast, and we are on the journey. This is Good Morning Nigeria on NTA Network Service. We'll be taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be concluding today's edition of the program.
There is a lot of fake news and report circulating, especially on social media, on the coronavirus. Do not believe or partake in the spread of these fake reports. If it is not on the official website or news from the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, disregard such report. Only together can we beat this virus. Only together can we overcome this pandemic. Follow the instructions and guidelines provided to combat this virus. Most importantly, stay at home. Self-isolate, regardless of your status. The virus doesn't move unless we move. Let us work together to better Nigeria. Together, we can do this. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
You've seen me promote Lifebuoy soap, but today I urge you to use whichever soap that is nearest to you, because washing hands with soap helps to fight the coronavirus. This is a public service announcement from Lifebuoy.
Nigerians, coronavirus is dangerous. It can kill. When you see this sign, high fever, cough, shortness of breath, drowsiness, pneumonia, don't panic, don't hide. Don't embark in self-medication. Promptly visit the nearest medical facility. Report all cases to the nearest hospital. Prevention is key. Avoid contact with infected persons. Avoid crowded areas as much as possible. Wash your hands regularly. Use hand sanitizers. Your life is precious. Stay alive. Live long, live right. This message is sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture and the Nigerian Film Corporation. Nigerian Film Corporation, powering possibility.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19, a corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
Nigerians, let us take responsibility. Stay healthy, stay safe, and curb the spread of the virus. Take responsibility. The coronavirus spreads from one person to another. Let us avoid crowd gathering of any kind for any reason. Take responsibility. Avoid traveling from one state to another during these lockdown restrictions. Obey all the rules that are put in place. Take responsibility. Stop spreading fake news and unverified reports about the coronavirus. There is no known cure for COVID-19. Take responsibility. Observe all the measures that can help stop the spread of the virus. Together, we can do this, but only if we take responsibility. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
You're welcome back, and it's Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. We have a number of tweets that have come in from our viewers, so my colleague and I will quickly go through these tweets and then return to our guests. Akeju Olagbaju tweets, that's to say, on the Infectious Diseases Bill 2020, it is not important now until the lessons in terms of successes and failures are learnt in dealing with COVID-19 so that we can use the legislative framework to address them. Now, while battling at the moment, we can rely on executive orders to address the emerging issues and deal appropriately with them in a period like this.
All right, from Nandom Weep, he says, why is it important now? I think there's time for everything, and it may be unwise to pass such a bill in the middle of the situation at hand. Let's set our priorities in order. God help Nigeria.
Mutana Farouk, now the need to tinker with the Infectious Diseases Bill and the enactment of new laws is pertinent to curb contemporary outbreaks of infectious diseases. Perhaps it will give legal teeth and define direction on how to manage cases of outbreaks of infectious diseases.
Law Alpha C, the bill ought to produce the legal framework with which the present experience can be tackled immediately. It's scaring that fatalities are on the rise.
Now, Cecilia Okoroma, if the infectious diseases bill is to be passed into law, let our lawmakers lead by example. The testing of vaccines must start with all our lawmakers. Let them also be ready to relinquish their properties to show patriotism. This is what leadership by example means.
Adamu Istefanos, this is where planning and planning implementation come in. Had it been a federal government plan and implement the planning, the infectious disease bill shouldn't have been proper and the legal solutions. The quicker federal government response without politicizing it, the better. Fatalities rise in sundry and alarming.
Now, Daniel Okechukwu tweets, now, if there is any clause in the bill that suggests compulsory vaccination of free citizens, it should be expunged from the bill. Our representatives must be seen to respect and uphold the tenets of democracy. Whatever good the proposed bill may serve, unless people accept it, the intended purpose will not be achieved.
All right, Ibiata and SM, the bill should take into consideration human rights and the enforcement should be done with caution. It should be no respect of persons, unlike the 1999 Constitution. I also think that the reps should be focusing on how to create the necessary environment and infrastructure, or how to fortify the existing institutions to encourage the development of an efficacious vaccine or medical cure for COVID-19.
Onyebuchi Ezenwa tweets, now this bill, when passed, will enforce vaccination on all Nigerians. When did vaccination become compulsory? Our house is on fire and we are busy chasing after rats. Our lawmakers should pass bills like hunger bills, Operation Feed the Poor Masses.
All right, Delegate Solomon, there is need for the House of Assembly or representatives to think twice and avoid giving such much power to the NCDC to solely manage infectious diseases in the country. We demand the House of Reps to host a virtual and physical public hearing, carrying out multi-layered stakeholder consultations and intensify publicly on the bill to enlighten Nigerians on the provisions of the bill. He went on to say, look, truth be told, the bill is coming at the wrong time. We call on the lawmakers to apply restraint on the speed to pass this bill, because there is nowhere in the world where vaccination is made compulsory. Well, you may be right there, but there are countries who will not enter if you don't take some vaccinations. Yeah.
That's right. There's certain kinds of vaccinations.
Exactly.
Certain kinds.
Yeah, if you don't do that,
if you want to travel for a yellow fever vaccine.
Exactly.
That's right.
To Saudi. I was subjected to it.
Yes.
In fact, I refused and said, "What? Yeah, it doesn't seem you want to enter. So you just have to." When I saw every other person complying, I quickly.
Certain kinds of, even for children, to prevent the 6 childhood killer diseases.
Exactly.
If as a parent you do not take your child for such vaccination, you could actually be arrested.
You have polio, yeah.
All right. Now, Innocent Yawa James tweets, this is not, that's in terms of the bill, this is not what we want at the moment. Or is there something that we really do not know about this bill? If really there's an attempt for compulsory vaccination as indicated in the bill, then there's a problem. Nobody is talking about producing the vaccine or drugs locally as a bill. Rather, the lawmakers are busy legislating what is inimical to Nigeria.
Well, Chris Simeon, infectious diseases bill that brought a lot of controversies in the House of Representatives some days ago is not what Nigerians need at this critical time. It won't solve our problems. The bill violates constitutional provisions because it failed to undergo public hearing. In this case, it abused human rights, so it should be kept aside.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, the government has a duty to protect everyone in Nigeria from infectious diseases and needs an effective piece of legislation to do so, especially now that the number of COVID-19 cases continues to grow. But the current bill in the National Assembly, if passed, will rob Nigerians of most of their rights. While there is need to modernize the old Quarantine Act to make it more effective, it must take account of human rights and civil liberties of Nigerians. The current infectious disease control bill in the National Assembly is too coercive and should be dropped.
Mike Anyako, infectious diseases bill, though very important, is not what Nigerians want to hear now. The crux of the matter is medicine that can immediately cure COVID-19 and palliative to the teeming masses. Things are very precarious at the moment. People are suffering. We want immediate solution. The proposed bill has lent credence to rising public concerns and the conspiracy theories of social media, locally and internationally, that the House of Reps is perhaps acting intensively under the dark influence of some global vaccine players with undeclared interest. Yeah, please, right. Is it true? Well, he's going to ask you a question. Is it true?
Well, yeah, that's right. But those are the things that people are saying. I just want to come back to Frank Tete. Part of what we have heard in reaction to the bill is that it's virtually a direct transplantation of a similar law in Singapore that was passed in 1977. I mean, Lee Kuan Yew modernized Singapore, but they also ran that state with an iron fist, which therefore provokes the issue as to the potential violation of human rights and human dignity. What are the risks in this kind of transplantation of pieces of legislation? That's one. But I want to take the second one along. Therefore, in making this transplantation, and without having due regard, I asked Honorable Shaba a while ago, why expend legislative time and energy without recourse to pre-existing pieces of legislation, policies, and other laws? We saw what happened just last weekend when the Supreme Court struck down a subsection of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, notwithstanding the nobility of the intention in passing that legislation in 2015 with regard to say, look, let there be no delay in criminal trials, which had always been the bane of our criminal jurisprudence. Now, I mean, you are having issues relating to compulsory acquisition of property without due process under this bill. You are having a potential violation of rights. And these are matters that the Constitution has already provided for. And when we talk about our Chapter 4 jurisprudence, those issues are there. So why are our lawmakers not averting their minds to this one instead of, as I asked earlier, seeming to spend legislative time and energy on matters that could become a nullity when, run through the court processes?
Yes, thank you very much. You see, let's be very humble about this. There is nothing wrong in importing laws. Why do you have to reinvent the wheel? After all, you know better as a lawyer that more than 50%, more than half of our statutes are imported from England, for example. They may have been reenacted, but they were imported from England. So it's important that when another country has passed through a certain situation and made copious laws on that, we can borrow, just like our penal code was borrowed from Pakistan in 1960, and it's still very relevant. Try and improve on it, whether you can. So there's nothing wrong with that. But the danger is when you just copy laws from a place like Singapore, which is completely different from our situation here in Nigeria. I want to ask a question, and I want to challenge the sponsors of this bill. What is there that the Director General of the NCDC or the NCDC itself wants to do that it cannot do with the current law that it has? What is there that the President needs to do now that he cannot do with the Quarantine Act of 1929, reenacted in 2004? What is it? So why unnecessarily, replicate laws? With much respect to the members of the National Assembly, we should avoid this fire brigade, lazy approach to lawmaking. Lawmaking, we have always canvassed, should be scientific. That's why you are paid so much. So hire so many aides to do legal research, to do other forms of research, so that by the time you come to argue, you become foolproof. Look at your counterparts in the United States Congress or in the Senate. And it is not because they are better than you, but because they have adequate support, adequate infrastructure in helping them in engaging in scientific legislation. Let us get one point clear. We operate, and this mindset must die. We operate as if government is against the people, or the people are against the government, and government must contain the people. Can you be, as a government, more interested in the life of the people than the people? So why, I keep hammering this point. take a look at the messages on NTA, how they appeal to the people. The people will be more, when you make them understand that it is in their best interest to carry on these prescriptions, they will be more religious in keeping to this than this military mentality. If you don't give up your house now because you want to use it for isolation, you will pay 2 million or you go to prison for 2 years. And now, if you don't vaccinate, we will send you to prison. And then the very funny part of it is Section 15 of the bill says that, look, if we suspect you and you run away, we will begin to track you. We can plant SIM cards, we can plant chips on you to survey. NCDC Director General, a medical doctor that becomes a spy master running after Nigerians, surveying. I mean, what kind of distraction is that? We don't need that at this time.
Okay, right. In everything that we do, especially well constructed formats or templates, there's always surveillance. There's always surveillance in medical field, in law, and what have you. We'll come to you, but I'd like to go back to Kano, where we have Professor Issa Sadiq Abubakar, who tends to some of the content of that bill with respect to making it a lot easier for the medical personnel to function effectively and efficiently in this country, whichever way the law comes, notwithstanding. But I want to believe, quite frankly, that the proponents of this bill must have gone through previous bill or legislations, concerning a Quarantine Act, either 2018 or 2004, and found some lacunas, if you like, let me use your language, and say, look, let us fill in this gap. Because viruses don't announce that they are coming. They just come, and when it comes, if you're not proactive, of course, it can knock you down, as COVID-19 did to so many countries today. America is yet to survive such an upsurge. So what I'm asking is this: do you think that there are some necessities, concerning that bill that you would love to be properly articulated and made strong, to enable the medical profession to work much better, especially with the issue of responding to viruses that don't announce that they are coming? I recall that Win Young, the Lee, who was the first person to really, notify the world about this coronavirus, who also died from that, did, raise alarm. And that was not listened to. And from this bill, I also saw a place where, look, that every doctor will be compelled to report any such, if you see any strange strain, you report it to NCDC. It's also part of this bill. What are your concerns?
Yeah, actually, when we are facing an unusual situation, such as the epidemic of COVID-19, we are really facing a tough challenge, and of course we have to get our acts together, and that is to say that we have to plan in the short term, in the middle term, and then long term. So one would expect that anything that will empower the medical doctors or public health practitioners, as I said earlier, is a welcome development. And so, starting to work on a legislation that will empower us is something that we should not throw away completely. We know that there are a lot of controversies in the bill, and so we need to come together and look at them, trying to extract those things that are obnoxious, but then holding back the ones that will help us. And if we do that, it doesn't have to be like this bill must come into effect in the near future, but then we need to start the journey. Even if we are to learn lessons from what is happening during this pandemic, at least we should gather all our experiences and try to improve on the situation. It may not come next month or in 6 months' time to come, but at least we should start working towards empowering agencies, empowering practitioners that will help us in ensuring that our public health laws stand.
All right, Professor Issa Sadiq, thank you very much. Let's go over very quickly to Ile-Ife, where we still have Professor Joshua Ojo. Professor Ojo, let's have your closing thoughts on this. I mean, you have Frank Tete here dead against the proposed bill, also the bill, not the proposed bill now, the proposed law. You listen to Professor Issa Sadiq. Let's get your closing thoughts on this. Is it a surplusage that we'll spend our time on, or we'll let it continue?
Thank you. I believe we can seize this opportunity to look inwards and do what needs to be done. For instance, in the earlier part of the program, you talked about the need for homegrown solutions, local research. I think this is the time to talk of it. We need to do collaborative research. If, even as the bill stands, if the implementation, if it will bring in professionals, environment health officers, environment health scientists, pharmacists, if all come together, it will make it, we can move forward from here. And it is very important, like Nigerians have been saying, that as good as vaccines are, they are products, they are works in progress, and they shouldn't be mandatory. Another issue with being mandatory is that it requires certification. That is, in fact, in my opinion, that is the crux of the matter. If it is mandatory, you need to get certification. In one of the sections there, if you are trying to leave the country, the port officer can demand to see your certification. Even if it is valid, he may determine that you should be revaccinated. Even that after that, he may determine that
Joshua,
you should be put in isolation.
We'll pause you there. Well, thank you. We're running out of time. Let's quickly bring in Honorable Shaba Ibrahim. Just your last thoughts on this.
Yeah, let me say that with respect that some of the things I've heard here seem to proceed from the premise that the entire act of the legislature over this bill is done and dusted. I mean, it's a very wrong premise. It's still work in progress. So to accuse the legislature of passing a bill up or proposing a bill that is obnoxious is this. I think it's way out of the way. And my friend is very uncharitable with us. He's called us lazy, and I don't think it should get to that, because if you look, you won't understand. You won't understand because you know individuals sometimes are driven by passion, depending on where this pressure is coming from. And finally, I want to state with all due sense, with all sense of responsibility, that those peddling the rumor about the legislature being compromised are simply being mischievous. I'm sorry. Let me. This is direct.
That's well. If anything else you say after now,
is out of time.
We don't go on.
Don't worry.
So, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim, member of the House of Representatives, always a delight having you on Abuja, Nigeria. So Frank Tete, pleasure having you on the program. And from Kano, Professor Issa Sadiq Abubakar, thank you very much for being with us this morning. From Ile-Ife via Skype, Professor Joshua Ojo, thank you very much for being with us. So that does it for us today. Good morning, Nigeria. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock. Stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Sadalo.
And I'm Kyrian. We might see you again tomorrow.